Happy New Year and welcome to this first meeting of this year. And you have seen the program, and it's a very exciting program. And a very brief introduction. Last year we have seen how Yuval Harari sharply describes and supports the spreading mentality that humankind does not deserve any special dignity. He claims the ongoing transformations in human consciousness and identity are so fundamental they will call the very term human into question. The attack to supersede and abolish humankind and make the term human nonsensical is running on two fronts, blurring the difference between humankind and other animal species. We have discussed this particularly last meeting, and reducing human beings to artificial intelligence to sort of package of algorithms. In this session today, we focus on the second front and aim to argue that human beings are considerably more than just intelligent machines or package of smart algorithms. In the meeting on May 1st last year, Ilias and Anna argued that artificial intelligence enhanced with quantum computing will be able to process natural languages and perform other tasks even better than humans can do. So it looks like capabilities may no longer be firm bases to found the dignity of humankind and the human persons. Which principle should we invoke instead? This is the question we would like to address today. And we start with the presentation by Marcin Paluch. Marcin is working on a PhD at the Neuroinformatics Institute of the ETH Zürich and the University of Zürich. He uses artificial intelligence to control fast and complex dynamical systems. And I think he will help us to understand basic principles of artificial intelligence and give an overview of a range of activities where artificial intelligence carries out tasks until recently considered reserved for humans. So please, Marcin.
Okay, thank you for this introduction, Antoine. As he said, I will now start with a small introduction to artificial intelligence, aimed first of all to those of you who has little to do with these technologies and mathematics, hopefully giving some feeling what is it about. Then we will move through the examples of application to more philosophical questions. Okay, for today, I brought you a very simple toy. We are playing nowadays a lot here in our lab. This is called cardball. It would be much nicer to show it to you in person in London, but we have to do this demonstration a bit more virtual. And you see, the idea is that we have a pole here. We have a card which can move right and left, and this card is here driven by the motor through this band, and the task is to keep the pole upright. Yes, and this is a controlling task for many reasons. Still interesting, nice benchmark to test different ideas for control algorithms, and for me also useful to start a small interactive part with you. I will maybe switch it off for a moment, and let me ask you a few first questions. Let's say now I do not know which side is for you, left and right. How do you see me mirrored or not? Let a point that this is the lab direction, this is the wall direction. Let's say my pole is falling towards the lab. Which direction do I need to move the cart so that I can keep my pole upright? Is the question clear first?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so who would dare to give some tentative answer? Should I move my cart towards the lab, or should I move it towards the wall?
I would say towards the lab.
Yes, very, very right. Yes, if I would move it in the direction towards the wall, my pole would incline even more. If I instead move it with enough acceleration towards the lab, I have a chance to bring it again upright. Okay, second more important task. Let's say I have my cart with my pole upright here, and I would like to move it to the other in the other direction, keeping the or having the pole at least at the beginning and end upright, and changing the position of my cart. So now the same question: what movements do I need to do with my cart?
First, move to the poles, to the wall, so it starts tilting over to the lab, and then you can keep moving it to the lab.
Absolutely right. That's beautiful explanation, and it also already gives you some intuition why the system is still interesting. Yes, because actually, if you formulate your task this way, you first have to do something counterintuitive. Now move the other direction, and then back to get to where you want. Now, it was generally easy to get the intuition about it, but of course, if we want to perform some control of this system, and in the best situation, we would like to perform this task in minimal time. We would like to we have to know how the system behaves. Yes, and we have to do some predictions about the system behavior. Okay. Yes, so we have our cart pole, and we want to predict how it will behave so that we can find this optimal way to interact with it. Now, generally in today's engineering science, however, there's two principal ways to approach this problem. One, let's say more classical way, is to do it through the physical description. Yes, so I draw my cart pole, I draw my force, gravitational force acting on the cart. I drove friction. I drove motor force. I drove gravitational force, so on. Then I, from Newton's law or Lagrange mechanic, I can derive the equations describing the system. And finally, I can say, okay, I know how it works. This know is maybe philosophically ambiguous, but let us stick to it for the moment. Yes, I got some description of the system from the physical principles. Based on this description, I can make predictions, and I can also find the optimal control of the system. Now, the only interesting thing is that I suppose it's not what we usually do. Yes, I don't know what about you, but when I was taught how to go through the pedestrian crossing, it was not like that my parents brought me to the crossing, and then my mom said, do you remember the differential equations for the car we taught you yesterday? Now you have to integrate them fast and then compare the time the car needs to get to the pedestrian crossing with the time you need to cross, and then you will know you can cross or not. Well, maybe the career of excellent physicists like André, who is with us, starts like this. But I guess for most of us, and also for me, it's not like this. The parents are bringing us to the pedestrian crossing maybe 500 times, 1,000 times, and showing us, okay, now you can cross, now you cannot cross. When we are trying on our own, maybe the car needs to brake violently, and then we know it, maybe it was too brave, so on and so forth. Yes, so we are collecting a lot of experiences, and then when we are coming to the pedestrian crossing, we can say, okay, I know some similar situations, no, and so I know how to react in this situation. And similarly, we can do the same in engineering. That is, we record a lot of experiments, and here you see, for example, the angle, position, force acting on my cart over time. And when I collected a lot of experiments, I can then say, okay, I've seen something similar before when I encounter a new situation. Yes, if my experience pool is sufficiently rich, I am kind of also done with this problem. Of course, here emerge a lot of questions. How do I deal with it? Do I need to memorize all of these experiences? How do I find the similar ones? This is a big topic. I will just say that you do not need to memorize them. The mathematics has better ways for it. We can come back to it in the discussion if you are interested. But the basic principle is like this. Yes, I've seen something similar, so I know how to act. Okay, this would be for the kind of mathematical part for this moment. Now let us proceed to what it is good for. And before I start showing you possibilities which artificial intelligence opens to us, I would like to ask you again a question. Which activities can define a human? In other words, which activities you would not expect to see being accomplished by a robot or by a computer?
Yeah, I said intuitively, I said reflecting. Reflecting is something that's particular to human beings, and I don't expect a machine to really properly reflect. We should define reflection, but I think you have a hint of it.
Maybe a second opinion to it? Somebody else?
I was going to say something similar, like reflecting metaphysical questions. It seems these are quite unique to us.
Okay, very good. The second answer is already, I like it as much more, but it's easier to verify. No, it's kind of difficult thing to verify if somebody is reflecting or only pretending he is reflecting. This also happens also to us humans. But anyway, I hope all of you have some ideas what you would not expect. And now I will show you different applications ordered in the way I think they should disconcern us a bit more and more. Yes, touching these spheres which we thought are reserved to us. I will start with like my field, what all these toys are good for. And I will show you one of the leaders here in this field of control here on the example of humanoid robots. Of course, one could also show a lot of examples with cars, with drones, but I must say, personally, I like this a lot. This is also this balancing problem. I think it's very spectacular that we can already program something like this. Yes, and okay, this is very spectacular, but let's be sincere. First, we can do still with our body a bit more when we train a lot. Well, maybe this jumping back is a bit dangerous, but generally we are able to do it. And second thing, in the nature, we are not a creature particularly talented in doing some special movements. And as an example, I like a lot this short video about a bat catching an insect. I think it shows marvelous skills which we can find in nature, which are way ahead of us and way ahead of our robots. Okay, now second group, face speech recognition, translation. Well, regarding the first, this is also a very hot topic at different conferences, also all about the private sphere and so on. It is also very impressive because we made an enormous progress in the last 10 years in it. The same regarding speech recognitions here, all these virtual assistants from Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, so on. But again, it's not so special in the sense, if you have a dog, this dog probably also can recognize your face, can recognize your voice, some commands you give to it. So maybe it's not so impressive when we study it more in deep. Well, translation is maybe a bit more, because language is something, at least at this level of advancement, is something special to human, as we believe. But here we probably still are a bit better than our machines, although again, artificial intelligence is doing huge progress in last years as well. Okay, third group, logical reasoning. Here I brought chess playing. I think it is already a bit more, because long time we believed we are probably the only creature in the whole universe which is able to play chess. And here suddenly this stupid piece of silicon can play better better than us. But again, if we think a bit longer about it, we can console ourselves. It's at least not new, in the sense, for the last 70 years, we probably knew that computers can do some logical operations much faster and better than we, with less mistakes, so on. So it was to be expected, to be frank, that at one day, computer will play chess better than we can play chess. I brought you one more small example. Do you recognize what game it is?
Poker.
Very nice. It is in fact poker. I must admit, for a long time I thought it's just a game for people to lose their money. But in fact, it's more difficult to teach poker to play well, to teach artificial intelligence to play well poker than to play well chess. Any ideas why?
Because in poker, you're supposed to cheat, and that's sort of machines that gets you out of logic, right? Cheating.
Yes, that's very good direction. Yes, kind of with chess you have everything on the table. With poker you have to deal with some probabilities. Which cards can this person has? Moreover, there are multiplayer. there are many players. So yes, but the first idea I think is the most important one. Yes, but cheating and dealing with probability, which is not obvious. Although also here I have to say
yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah, second option of a second. Yeah, poker and chess are of course both games. So there are certain rules and certain logical operations that can be derived from that. But yeah, like the rules of poker are much more, like they're more complex indeed, as you already suggested. And I think like just connecting to like the human essence, I think like this ability to play games with certain rules and certain outcomes is was very important for human success. Also with this imagination, because you want to, like in your imagination, you already play a game in a mental model that you have. And that's also with poker, you already have to make some steps ahead. And yeah.
Great answer. Still, I can already now tell you that the world champion in poker is also a computer for today. It is also thanks to the advancement of this probabilistic artificial intelligence. There's a lot of research, yes, how to deal with the probabilities, and we are getting it better and better. Okay, last group of tasks I prepared for you. I think the most disconcerting for us, literature and art. I think something in which we think till today that our soul get expressed. And here, two examples. First, I brought you an article from The Guardian. About article itself, there are many controversies. Some people say that not that machine written it, but it was edited. The people from the newspaper answer that also human writers needs to be edited. Anyway, however we look at this particular article, it is a fact that nowadays artificial intelligence can write a few paragraphs of reasonable text. which is difficult to distinguish from a text written by a human. And now, slowly shifting towards this philosophical question. Again, the same principle, yes, this artificial intelligence is consuming before a lot of text, a lot of books, a lot of articles. Mostly is given some title or first paragraph, and then it is kind of thinking what could come next, yes, and based on its experience. And the question is it what we humans do or not? Yes, some people say no, we are creative. On the other hand side, were I so creative when I was preparing this presentation? I don't know. In fact, I must admit, I just think what I saw, what nice examples I know, what could be interesting to you, and somehow put it together in some hopefully reasonable way. So this is one thing. And now my I guess most important example is art. Here with Van Gogh style Antoine, our organizer of this conference. And I guess painting art, visual art is particularly where we think that it is a place for expression of human soul. And here suddenly a machine can also do something at least very similar. Okay, this much for the examples. Let me finish with just one last slide. This is something from very different epoch. This is a map of the universe from 16th century, almost 500 years old. You see different scientific view or the different worldview with the Earth in the very middle of the universe. And then you see around the Earth different orbits. Yes, you have first Moon, Luna. Then you have some planets we also know today, Mercury, Venus. Then fourth orbit is Sun. Then when we go further and further, we find at the very end something super interesting. When you can read this text, it's Celum Empyreum Habitaculum Dei et Omnium Electorum. That means, in short, heaven. And now, why do I think it's so interesting? It was never a dogma of Catholic Church, but the heaven is somewhere at the last orbit. But it was very fitting suited for people back then to take their scientific picture of the world, which gave them this vast empty space at the last orbit and place in their imagination heaven there. Yes, and this also gives us a hint why it's met so much resistance to change to a sun-centered worldview. Yes, it was not only about changing the scientific worldview. It was also a question, okay, what now with our heaven? Yes, and I think something very similar is happening today with artificial intelligence in the context of relation to human nature. Yes, that we had our kind of scientific beliefs about what only human can do. Yes, and we used them to define who we are. Now the advance of technology is forcing us to rethink what only we can do. Yes, and search for a better definition of who human is. Yes, but I think this history is very optimistic, at least when we look at this map right here. Yes, for us Catholics, at least, it was a great impulse to rethink what really heaven is and how do we imagine heaven, and also deepen the understanding of faith, deepen the theological thought. And I think today we are standing in front of the same chance to deepen our understanding of what human is. And now I'm looking forward to following speeches to also myself understand better, thanks to the next speakers, who we are and how to define who we are. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Marcin. So that I think this is very nice presentation to see how artificial intelligence is working now in the labs. And now I would like to ask Ilias and Anna to present. Ilias and Anna. Ilias Khan is the founder and CEO of Cambridge Quantum Computing, and I would like to thank him also for sponsoring this meeting we are running. And Anna Pearson, he is researcher in Cambridge Quantum Computing, developing quantum natural language processing approach, and they will address the question of whether quantum computers may become more capable than humans. So it's still improving the what we have seen with, let's see, classical artificial intelligence presented by Marcin. Please, Ilias and Anna.
Thank you very much indeed. Anna's going to be the person who's going to control the slides. I hope everybody can hear us. Let me first introduce ourselves. My name is Ilias, and I've been introduced in terms of my formal work title, but of course my more important role is friend of and associate of the organizers of this annual conference. I'm a Netherhall alumni, and I'm extremely engaged in this discussion worldwide as far as the ethics of this paradigm, which is, in my opinion, more important than the last two industrial revolutions. We are living through enormous change, which is in the short term going to affect every single aspect of our lives. And I, as a believer, as a Christian, I want to be involved in the debate that shapes the ethics and control of this technology, unlike the last two, where we did not have a voice in controlling how we use this tool. This is my motivation, and this is why I'm so grateful to Antoine and others for allowing us to explore and collaborate and learn from each other on a multidisciplinary purpose. Anna, would you please introduce yourself?
As you know, my name's Anna. I work for Cambridge Quantum in the natural language processing team. I studied theoretical physics at Royal Holloway to do my master's, and then I did a PhD at Oxford University looking at if gravity was quantum rather than classical.
Thank you, Anna. Anna is a talented young colleague of mine. If you go to the next slide, Anna, slide number 2, I want to give a very quick introduction to the place that Anna and I both work. It's a company called Quantinuum. Quantinuum is the result of a merger between Cambridge Quantum Computing, which was the company I founded, and an American hardware company called Honeywell Quantum Solutions. Quantinuum is the most dominant player in the quantum computing environment. There may be some hidden dominant player in China that we don't know about, but as far as we can tell, we span the activities ranging from the development of a quantum processor with the highest quantum volume currently available. We also have the middleware in terms of the operating system and the compilers. We also have application layers ranging from chemistry to machine learning, all the way through to cybersecurity and, of course, artificial intelligence. And the basis of our insights range, between 5 years and 20 years, because we do have some of the world's most talented people involved in this business. So we're very proud of this association. If you go to the next slide, I'll get into the presentation itself. And if you would basically do all of the bullet points, you don't need to do them one by one. You know, there's a lot of debate about quantum computers in terms of relevance or irrelevance. I remember in 2015, I was involved in a debate at the Cambridge Union Society where some people said, well, there's no relevance in our lifetime. Well, of course, this is no longer true. Organizations, I know of no other technology in the last, well, in human history, where nation states have made it their priority. The German quantum push, which was initiated by Angela Merkel, is based on the fact that unless Germany is competent in quantum technologies, there's an existential risk to their wealth. The United States has a congressional bill on a single technology a year ago. The United Kingdom, France, Japan, of course, China, where this year it is the #1 item, more than pollution, more than water, as far as the Chinese authorities are concerned. Across the world, I have never seen this, and neither of you. You may not have heard of it, but you've never seen it. Why? Why is this the case? About 8 months ago, Google said that they will have a fault-tolerant device within 7 or 8 years. It doesn't matter whether you believe them. This is what they believe. Microsoft have said that unless they can build their own fault-tolerant device, their company will be obsolete. IBM have said by the end of 2023, they will have a computer that has a direct impact on artificial intelligence maneuvers that affect our day-to-day life. These are just some things that are happening. My company is working with Total on the sequestration of carbon so that we can solve some of the world's problems. We are working with Roche to solve Alzheimer's. This is why quantum computers, and it doesn't matter whether you understand how they work. I don't understand how this works, but I use it. I can tell you that this is going to change our lives in the next few years. In fact, this year, a key for cybersecurity, if you go to the next slide, Anna, a key for cybersecurity has been created that is literally unhackable. Now, there's a wide range of opinion. I still come across some academics who say, oh my God, it's never going to happen, you're full of crap. And there are other people who think it's going to happen tomorrow. There is now an informed opinion and consensus that we are on a 1 to 5 year track when these things will have an impact. Think of the late 1980s when telephones first came in mobile telephony. Nobody knew they were happening, just a few people, and suddenly they arrived. Similarly, the internet, etc., etc. Now, about a year ago, not quite a year ago, I wrote an op-ed in Scientific American. And the reason that I wrote the op-ed, and if you go to the next slide, Anna, is that I wanted to start a conversation. And the reason I wanted to start the conversation is that we live in a deeply corrupt society. Organizations that control data and talk about artificial intelligence, and it is artificial, it's not intelligent, it's artificially intelligent, control vast amounts of our economic activity. They were unregulated, and we, our generation, my generation, I'm 59, did nothing about it in the mid-90s. There was no regulation. We now are paying some of the consequences, but the impact of quantum computers on the lives of our children and their children will be much greater. So we must start now talking about why there should be an ethical approach, and we should ask ourselves the hard questions about democratization, about the vast inequalities of wealth, and the exploitation of these technologies, which will impact the dignity of human life. This is a debate, and I'm very happy that this debate is now being picked up. It is still dominated by self-interest, by people who are more interested in making money, A, or B, who are in denial, people who are involved in classical artificial intelligence, and they refuse to accept that what they're doing is already obsolete. These two embedded naysayers are the reason why we must lead with this debate. I go now to the next slide. This is a very important question, therefore, also from the spiritual standpoint, which I am representing in today's conversation. The previous slides, I've given you a taste of what occupies me in my daily life. Now I'm turning to this particular topic, which Antoine has asked us to consider. And I believe that this is a threat. I answer the question, when they become more capable, and we already discussed other technologies that are more capable, but quantum offers a very different level of assertion for capability. My answer is yes, this is a threat to our perception. And so in the rest of this presentation, Anna and I will try to give you very quickly some comments on what we think might be a potential response to this threat. Anna, over to you.
So as we heard in the previous talk, computers and also many other devices are already better than humans at many things. For example, flying an airplane is much better than we can't fly, or lifting heavy things. Even some surgery is done by robots now. Also, calculations. We couldn't have got to the moon without computers. Computers are just much better at calculating numbers than humans can. They can also remember things. I mean, if you store something on a computer, unless you destroy it, it's there. They can do many processes at the same time. And also, as we heard in the previous talk with artificial intelligence and machine learning, they can learn from patterns in data, things that that we struggle to, or that we don't grasp. One example from this year is the previous year, 2021, is the protein folding problem, which AlphaFold solved, Google's DeepMind AI team. And this has been a challenge to biologists for the past 50 years. And it's been solved using machine learning. And so, as Elias has been saying, the processing power of a fault-tolerant quantum computer will open up so many new, so many more doors to discovery, and we have a much bigger threat to our perception of humanity. For example, quantum computers will be very good at optimization problems. So classical computers are good at calculations, but they're not very good at very large-scale combinatorics problems. So this is problems which involve the way in which items are arranged. And this is because as the number of items grows, the number of combinations to organize them in grows exponentially. Now, quantum computers can make use of quantum parallelism, which is performing many operations in parallel, to hugely speed up the amount of time needed to find a solution to such a problem. And quantum parallelism arises from the ability of a quantum state to exist in a superposition of basis states, something that is not possible classically. Another area where quantum computing is set to transform things is chemistry. Quantum chemistry simulations for drugs and materials discovery. Now, this is perhaps the first use of quantum computers that was predicted by Richard Feynman back in the 1980s to simulate nature, because nature isn't classical, it's quantum. And if we can simulate a material or a drug to understand its molecular structure and its properties before needing to synthesize it in the lab, we can choose the best candidates and speed up the drug and materials discovery process, and also reduce the cost of discovery. And also, a molecule's property is strongly influenced by its lowest energy state. And so you need to assess the interactions between every electron and every proton in every atom in your molecule. And this gives rise to a huge number of interactions to be simulated. So classical computers can cope with very small molecules, but quantum computers will open up possibilities to simulate much, much larger and complex molecules for both drugs and materials discovery. As already touched upon, cryptography is also threatened by quantum computers. In fact, the World Economic Forum has highlighted that quantum computing could make today's cybersecurity obsolete. This is due to Shor's 1994 algorithm, that allows you to find the prime factors of an integer in polynomial time. So one of the standard public key encryptions used is RSA, and this would be reduced from exponential complexity to polynomial complexity. Or in other words, the safety of a widely used encryption method would be compromised. However, solutions to this threat are already being found using quantum enhanced cryptography tools, which is one of the things that Cambridge Quantum already has on offer, this product Quantum Origin. And then finally, although this is not an exhaustive list, is quantum artificial intelligence, and in particular, natural language processing. So to put it quite simply, the space in which things can be represented when making use of quantum mechanics is much, much larger than when constrained to classical mechanics. And so you can't really predict the power that quantum AI and QNLP could unlock, because we can't really imagine it. But models trained on a quantum computer may have more predictive power, giving more accurate results. They might be faster. They might learn better in situations where only small amounts of data are available, or all three of these things. So in particular with language processing, which is the team that I work on, our aim is to open up the black box of current language processing techniques and implement models which are interpretable. And the list goes on as new applications are being discovered every year. I think this is back to you, Ilyas.
Sorry, yeah, I'm only going to make a very quick comment on this because I think it leads into the next few slides. I mean, it's very easy to make these big statements. I just wanted to make one point on this slide, and then we quickly move back to you, Anna. You know, whoever's in the audience today, earlier we were asked what makes a human different from a machine, or what makes a machine different from a human. And somebody said reflection, and somebody, I think, said metaphysical reflection. I think it's a fantastic answer. But one thing which society tends to do is to reduce things to the lowest common denominator. And when already I see people interacting with Siri and Alexa, they treat the machine almost as a human being. And of course, as we all know, Alexa has no understanding of the question that it is being asked. It has zero ability of doing anything other than recognizing some sounds and correlating them with patterns. A quantum computer will create meaning-aware language processing that goes beyond words, beyond sentences, to conversations and whole texts. This capability alone represents a fundamental shift in a human relationship with a device. All other relationships where we perceive a computer to be better are mechanical, memory, brute force, lifting, speed. But when we engage intellectually with something that starts to occupy Hilbert space and utilize it so that the counterpart is in a conversation where you and I, it's not about writing an article. That is very trivial. This is about real-time engagement with a device that cannot be distinguished. This is the ultimate Turing test. This will happen within the next 3 to 4 years. In fact, a proof of concept is likely to happen within the next year. These are the type of things that will threaten the capability of the human being to identify his dignity or her dignity as opposed to machines, which is why the next few slides I would encourage you to think about. Anna, back to you.
So to look at the question a bit more carefully, what do we mean by capable? Well, a dictionary definition is the ability to do or achieve a specified thing. And I think if you're following our line of reasoning, we've made it very clear that quantum computers will certainly become more capable than humans in certain areas. And as we learned from the previous talk, this is nothing new. Machines are already better than humans at many things. So I would like to slightly turn the question around So we can worry about the threat of quantum computers becoming more capable than humans, or we can wonder if they can actually help us express our humanity. So what if part of being human is designing, building, and making use of tools? So what if quantum computers will help humans become more capable, for example, at managing and understanding the world around us? And not just more capable in understanding the world around us. What happens if scientific advances, such as the development of quantum computers, but also just any scientific advances, what if they help us increase our worship of God, help us in our spiritual lives as we understand the work of his hands better? As the psalmist wrote, "Great are the works of the Lord, they are pondered by all who delight in them." So what happens if quantum computers, amongst other things, can help us build up human identity rather than threaten it? So God said to subdue the earth and all that is in it. Now, part of subduing the earth, taking care of it in a life-giving way, is to understand it. Now, if quantum computers can help us develop better medicines to overcome disease, or better carbon capture methods to help combat climate change, then my personal opinion is this is part of the Genesis mandate. And also not just taking care of the world, but understanding the world because it was made by God. As it says in Romans, God's invisible qualities have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made. And we know that all things were created through God and by God. And so by studying the world, and if quantum computers help us understand more of the world, they can help us understand a bit more about our creator. And then this last point is a slight aside, but we've been thinking a lot about humans. But I believe that it's the whole of creation that worships God. Indeed, Jesus said, if humans keep quiet, the stones will cry out. That, and as it says in the Psalms, the heavens declare the glory of God. So by understanding the world around us better, I think it draws us closer to God and helps us fulfill our humanity rather than threaten it. And let's just have a quick look at what the Bible says about humankind, although I'm sure this will be covered in more detail in other talks. I think we would all agree that we are made in the image of God. And although we may mar that image at times, the Bible says that with God's Spirit, he is transforming us into his image as we walk with him every day. And also that we are his children, that we're children of God. And so, however clever or capable a machine will be, it will never be made in the image of God. It would not know the Spirit of God. It cannot seek for God and find him, and will never be a child of God. And I would wish to argue that it is the gift of God that is bestowed upon us that is the core of our humanity, not our reasoning power, our ability to play chess or to discover new patterns in data. So to summarize, I think this is still me, not Ilyas. Will quantum computers become more capable than humans? Well, yes, they will. And is this a threat to what it means to be human? Well, it depends what you define as human. There is a present danger. But my view is that making use of quantum computers can help us fulfill what it is to be human in some ways. I don't know if Ilyas, you want to add anything?
I think this is almost the end now. It is the end. Is there another slide?
There's one more slide, but yeah.
Go to the last slide, then we can finish quickly, and then we can remain on time. It's a rather beautiful ending that is there. In fact, I just want to say something. Antoine, you know, Anna and I were working on this presentation, and I have to say to you, Antoine, that I found the last 3 or 4 slides of Anna very beautiful.
Yes.
And I think it's really, I'm quite emotional about this. I think it summarizes our message.
Yes.
So I'm just going to finish on one point. I think we all have a mission. And I think I encourage anybody who's listening here not to worry about whether this is right or wrong, or whether, computers will come next week or next year. It doesn't matter. Quantum is happening. The revolution is here. And I think our mission is to be in the public square, to show to people our values and to say, this time we can get it right. This time we can be in charge of a technology that serves humankind. Antoine, you wrote a very interesting paper about the mystery of quantum. You remember you shared it with me when we met 3 years ago. And in that mystery of quantum, whether it's the measurement problem or whether it's a non-locality problem, whatever it is, the EPR test, these mysteries will be solved, I think, by our understanding of quantum computers, and they help us to get further to the mystery of reality itself. And that is where I think that we have an obligation now to make a loud and clear statement that these devices are for the good of mankind. And then we have to define what is good. We cannot stop. We cannot say, oh, it's for the good of mankind. We have a duty to define. And that's why I think we are now in this position. People like Anna and myself who are involved in quantum computing at a big scale. And we have not even given you a sense of that scale. There's many things that we have not said about what we are doing. We are doing an enormous amount, but we have a duty to say what is good and what is not good. So for the rest of today and tomorrow, I hope that these things can also be debated so that Anna and I can learn from you, and so that we can be inspired and we can say to our colleagues and our customers and our partners what is good and how that good can be achieved. So thank you, Antoine, for your introduction and for your invitation. We're deeply grateful to the opportunity to have this conversation.
Well, so Ilias and Anna, I thank you very much for this stimulating presentation. And really you are in a privileged position for contributing to defining what is good for humankind. I think that is the key question. So let's start now with the discussion, so that there are probably stimulating ideas for you too, Ilias and Anna. Please, who want to ask?
My name is Jose Rafael.
Yeah.
I'm a third-year physics student at Imperial College London. I'm particularly interested in quantum information and quantum computing. So I'm also a Catholic, and I also have a huge interest in all these philosophical questions. So my question now is, so when you were talking about the engaging in this conversation, like in the public sphere, so I think I completely agree with the fact that the main difference between computers and human beings is that we can engage with God, we can see God, and we can talk with him, and that's very fundamental. But in terms of like the discussion in the public sphere, I was wondering which kind of, so the human beings are the image of God, and so therefore there's some footprints of God in what it means to be human. So I was wondering, which of those footprints of God can we point out in human beings that can help in this public sphere discussion to help people see how human beings are fundamentally different from computers? And in this sense, I was thinking maybe about freedom, but I wanted to ask what's your point of view in this respect, Anna and Ilias? I don't know if I made myself clear.
Oh, you're very clear. Jose, first of all, you're a Netherhole boy, right?
Yeah.
Yes, this is the first thing you should have said.
Yeah, I totally forgot.
No, seriously. Yeah, look, I was very inspired about 6 or 7 years ago by a rereading of Cardinal Newman, Henry Newman, and John Henry Newman. And you know, it was really interesting. And what I learned from that, what I was inspired by, was that we must utilize the tools that society gives us and build from the bottom up. So my strategy at the moment is very deliberate. I try to sponsor and be involved in as many organizational discussions as possible about the ethics around quantum. And this could be governmental. I'm on various committees here in the UK, in the US. I'm speaking to the Swiss government. I also sponsor research. There's an Oxford University organization. I also get involved in these types of discussions. And what I try to do, Jose, is not elevate the conversation into the traits that make us image of God. I take that as a given. What I try to do is use the language that is already around us and engage in that language to point out the good behaviors. My view is that if we focus on that, we meaning Christians, Catholics, then we're at stage one. Then, because people are threatened in this world when we invoke the Spirit of God, it's 400 years of constant undermining of faith. Even today, we're scared of this. So I'm no longer scared, but I'm trying to be smart. And that's my advice to you as well, is focus on the common goods. Everybody knows, I have children, Jose, and they're just always like this, right? These are horrible things that are the consequences of the last 25 years that everybody would agree with. There are other consequences as well. Point number one. Point number two, how can we use it for good? How can we show that we are different? So in what Anna was saying earlier, one of the things that clearly is good is the custodianship of this planet. And so one of the big projects that we're investing in is carbon sequestration. And I think by doing that and showing that we can do some good and that the benefits of that can be for the good of mankind, then we can really focus energy on the debate about ethics. Lastly, governments have a role to play, right? Governments have a role to play. We must not allow this technology to be in the hands of 5 people. Like, why is Apple a $3 trillion company? And there are still people who can't survive from one day to the next. It is immoral. And we cannot allow this to happen in the next 20 years. So these are the basic tenets, Jose. I wish I had the answer. I don't have the answer. Each day I get up in the morning and I pray that we can make a small step forward, a small step forward.
Now I am glad to present you André Rubbia. André, he has spent his entire life focusing on fundamental research in particle physics. He is full professor at ETH Zürich since more than 2 decades, and he has always been struck by the aesthetics of the physical law. Please, André.
All right, so thank you, Antoine, to invite me to give this talk and to try to answer, in fact, this question, which turned out to be a very difficult question now that I think about it afterwards, of knowing whether humans are merely biological computers. And obviously, I think what you meant by this question is, are we more than biological computers? So that's the challenge. It's indeed what we've heard in the previous talks, that artificial intelligence, quantum computers. I put all that in the term of technology. I'm sorry if I reduce it to technology, but technology will, in fact, promise a lot of new inventions and new capabilities. And obviously, I think we really have to think where we are. I think in those lines are really, I am in synergy with what Lyas was saying. So let me see if I can get you through my slides. And well, before we go in all the details and hopefully, you know, you get where I want to get, I want to make an analogy, okay? And this very simple analogy is about flying. I think it was mentioned before by Anna. And how did we go about learning how to fly? Initially, we tried to imitate birds. And in fact, humans built several kind of machines. And these machines were not always that successful at flying. In fact, some of them were really catastrophic, as you know. Now, at some point, we developed a theory, which is the theory of aerodynamics. And with the theory of aerodynamics, we actually design flying machines. And today we have planes, helicopters, drones that fly perfectly. And actually, they don't fly exactly like birds do. And so in the following, I will assume that indeed all these promises that all this technology is telling us is going to happen, but my feeling is that it has to go the following way. We first have to develop a theory of intelligence. We need to understand what is intelligence. And then once we have a theory of intelligence, then technology obviously will allow us to create entities that are intelligent. And this is what we call acting as humans. And as we've heard, eventually surpassing humans. And I think this is what really artificial intelligence is about. So let's assume that this is the case. And so the question is, are we biological computers, right? So the way I see it is that there are many related questions. So first of all, if we look at the big picture, okay, we know that in the future, science will be able to explain the physical mechanism behind life and intelligence. Basically, science will tell us how we work, okay? And I give you some examples. The planetary science will give us the origin of the Earth. This is important because life has emerged on the Earth. And so this is a very fundamental point. So what is the origin of Earth? Then the next point is life science that will tell us what is the origin of life. And then, as I told you before, this theory about intelligence could be the result of neuro and cognitive sciences, which will then lead to our understanding of the origin of intelligence. Then, of course, we can use technology. And technology applies this science to cure, replicate, improve life and intelligence, are exceeding our ability to think, to create, as we've seen before, articles and other art, and be able to make optimal decisions and solve problems. So we will think, we'll be able to create machines that will think better, not only faster, okay? And that's where essentially the question resides, right? So once you have AI able to create music, art, design cities, buildings, AI able to solve problems such as discovering new drugs, as was mentioned before, take decisions on how to cure people, where do we stand, okay? Up to now, everything has been shaped by human intelligence. Our societies, our civilization, the entire world that we know. And now we're faced in a situation where human intelligence will be superseded by AI. So it's clear that this will totally change the evolution path of our societies. It will have a huge impact. So will humans be reduced to biochemical thinking robots, living in an adequate physical environment, dependent on technology to reach our objectives and surpassed by ultra-capable machines? So are we about to lose the dignity of humankind? I think that's the question that we're here to discuss. So to move forward, I would like to make a reference to Sant'Agostino. And you can see here what he said. And if I translate to English, I can say, basically, and men go to admire the peaks of the mountains and the great waves of the sea and the long course of the rivers and the immensity of the ocean and the revolving of the stars. And they forget themselves. So in all this incredible technology and science, let's not forget about ourselves and ask who we are, because if we want to know what we are, we need to really understand and focus and not forget ourselves. So from my point of view, what is really really incredible about humans is that we are an extreme rarity. And in order to realize that, you just look at the universe. You can see here a picture, somebody looking at the sky, and you can see that humans are an extreme rarity. Okay, we're almost something strange, an oddity compared to the enormity of the universe containing billions and billions of stars. As far as we know, there are no other places in the universe that support intelligent life. We have not found any evidence for it. Now, we believe that maybe soon some other life form will be found in our galaxy, but still the fact remains, we know already today that this is an extremely rare fact. Okay, so this is an objective fact. This leads to what's called Fermi's paradox. So Fermi was an Italian physicist, and he said, if life is so easy, someone from somewhere else must have come calling by now. So either we would have found this other civilization, or they would have found us. And that doesn't seem to be the case. So this is Fermi's paradox. And if you want, the question is, why is the universe so large and apparently so empty? So Drake, also an astronomer and astrophysicist, tried to put this in the form of an equation. So he wrote n is the number of civilization in our galaxy with which communication might be possible as the product of different factors, okay? And you can read here in detail all what these factors are. I'm not going to into detail at this moment of all of them, but basically Drake made some wild guesses at what these numbers could be. For example, one number which I would like to point out is this factor Fi. Fi is the fraction of planets with life that develop intelligent life. And he assumed this was 100%. So he assumed that as soon as life develops on the planet, then intelligent life as we know it will develop. So is this correct or not? Well, he made all kinds of assumptions. And then if you multiply this through, you get that n, this number of civilizations, should be something like 0.1 per year times L, where L is the length of time for which such civilization release detectable signal, which could be anywhere between 100 and 10,000 years. And this leads to the paradox. The paradox is that this Drake equation with these parameters would predict that there should be a lot of civilization, whereas we don't see any. Now, the good news is that the Drake assumption can be tested, and they're now within the reach of modern experimental science. There's going to be a lot of progress in the next decade. Astrophysicists are observing an increasing number of Earth-like planets. So indeed, we can answer many of these questions and quantify better what's going on. Planetary science is exploring in detail objects in the solar system, so we will know what planets are composed of and whether they could support life. And organic biochemistry is making fascinating progress on the reverse engineering of the mechanism of life on Earth. So we'll be able to quantify the validity of Drake's equation, and it could be that this number n is much smaller than 1, or it could be equal to 1, or it be much greater than 1. Much greater than 1, as we know, because of Fermi's paradox, is likely excluded. So if it turned out to be about 1, then that would explain why we're here. But we would be alone in our galaxy. If n is much smaller than 1, which is also possible, then we would just be here by some chance. And I will come back to that. So what's intelligent life? Because that's also what we're asking ourselves. So we can connect intelligent life to the fact that we have a brain. And the human brain is really a fantastic organ, as you know. And I list here all the different capabilities that the brain has. And I would like to just point out a few of them. It provides us with intuition. We believe it creates our consciousness. it can project ourselves into the future, to the point that we even ask ourselves what will happen to us after we die. This is truly exceptional and addresses questions such as why we are here. And so this was already pointed out before. We clearly have this spiritual aspect in our human brain that is a very important capability. And I'll come back to that. So the capabilities of the human brain distinguish humans from other species, and I would use that to define intelligent life. So will all planets that could develop life at some point develop intelligent life? What you can see here is this graph, okay, that shows the history of the evolution on Earth in billion years. And as you know, following Darwin, intelligent life can be seen as the result of a very long evolution process that requires billions of years. And what's striking here is, first of all, the following point. So as you can see here, there's one event I would like to point out, is that, as you might know, the Earth was hit about 4.5 billion years ago by a lost planet, which is sometimes called Theia. And this totally wrecked the surface of the Earth, and it created the moon. And we believe that this event has been critical in the formation of oceans. And in fact, we have evidence for the existence of oceans that date back 3.8 billion years ago. Then what you can see that relative to this, the life appeared very soon, 3.5 billion years ago. So only 300 million years after the oceans were, we know that oceans were formed, we have evidence of life. But intelligent life, which is here defined as the appearance of Homo sapiens, is really at the end. It's 0.0002 billion years, okay? So even on Earth, where we think the conditions are optimal, intelligence has emerged very late relative to the Earth's lifetime. And you can see here graphically, what you see here is a horizontal time scale, is a time scale of billions of years of the life of the sun. It started here with the birth of the sun. Here we are, we believe we're about 4.5 billion years after the birth of the sun. This is now. And in fact, on this scale, the emergence of intelligent life and now are indistinguishable. And what's striking is that in a billion years from now, we expect that the sun will start a gradual warming. And this warming will make, in fact, the Earth uninhabitable for complex life. It will be too warm for life to exist on Earth. So you can ask yourself, using statistical methods, what's the likelihood of this actually to happen in this way? And you realize that there was a high likelihood that intelligent life could have evolved too slowly and emerged too late compared to the lifetime of the Earth. So again, the fact that intelligent life appeared seemed to be the result of a statistical fluctuation. So are we really here by chance? Well, let's try to move forward. And as Antoine said inside his introduction about myself, but I think this can be applied to anyone studying fundamental science, whether it's mathematics, physics, chemistry, biochemistry, biology, medicine, computer science, I suppose. Well, we've all been confronted with the intrinsic beauty, driving force, and hidden aesthetics of nature. And this is something that we can't ignore. And this leads me to the Entropic Principle. So humanity's very existence shows that the structure and the physical laws of the universe do permit intelligent life to appear. We are here, we know that with 100% probability. We are certain. But we are faced with a difficult problem of explaining its extreme unlikely nature. It seems so unlikely to happen. How can it happen? Why are we here? And we even saw that not only life, but intelligent life is possible, but also appeared after very unusual coincidences. Entropic Principle goes even further and imagines that the physical laws could be changed. And we believe that if any of the physical laws of the universe Okay, we mentioned quantum mechanics, physics, any laws, even slightly, just a little bit, then the universe would be a different place. And it could be that no form of complexity would exist, no stars, no planets, no biochemistry, and therefore no intelligent life. So this raises the question of whether the universe has been finely tuned such that intelligent life could appear. Just to show you some examples, life is possible. It means proton, neutrons, electrons form atoms, elements can form, stars and planets can form, chemistry can happen, organic chemistry can support life, etc. And the local coincidences we have discussed. Our sun is a rare type of star. The Theia hit the Earth, forming the moon at the right moment, which formed oceans. Earth is just in the right orbit around the sun, such that water remains liquid and is tilted. Life emerged. Intelligent life had enough time to develop. I mean, think about all this. If you change any of these conditions, you don't have intelligent life. So maybe you already know this quote from Albert Einstein. He said, the temptation to believe that the universe is the product of some sort of design, a manifestation of subtle aesthetics and mathematical judgment is overwhelming. The belief that there is something behind it all is one that I personally share with a majority of scientists. So what's the reason? That's the question. So we must accept the observational and irrefutable fact of our extreme rarity in the cosmos. That's a fact. I mean, if you think about what I listed before, the number of conditions that have to line up exactly to create life is staggering. And in addition, we saw that if any of the physical law of the universe was slightly altered, then this would not be able to happen. And if it weren't for a series of exceptional events, then intelligent life would not exist on Earth. So this really brings us to the difficult question of why we are here. Is it really just by chance? And the probability for this to happen seems to be extremely, extremely small. Now, you can, of course, reverse this statement and see it in a positive way. You can rather say, and going back to Entropic Principle and to the tuning of the universe, that the size of the universe and its physical laws are such that intelligent life will appear. And this brings us, of course, to theism. Okay. In fact, to illustrate this, I would like to mention a quote from the Canadian astrophysicist Hubert Reeves, who basically said in English, the universe is a machine to create consciousness. So what's the true answer? Can we answer the question? Science is a tool developed by humans to explain what we perceive through our senses. However, science explains the how, but cannot answer the why. The why are we here, is the true answer. Technology could eventually create entities that perform more powerfully at living, could create immortal entities which live forever and better thinking than ourselves. I call these technological accomplishments. And of course, going back to what Elias was saying, and one could debate a lot on this, of course, this technological accomplishment will hopefully benefit society if we design them to do so. But that's beyond the point here. The point here is that pure performance is not the full answer. There's more to humans than just being, the dream of being immortal or the dream of doing everything perfectly. This pure performance is not the full answer. So Saint-Exupéry in The Petit Prince wrote the following quote, which I like very much. He said, I believe in everything that escapes man. I distrust everything that comes from him. So what's the humanity uniqueness? Well, clearly, we have to distinguish ourselves from machines. We are not machines whose qualities are based only on performance. Very often in the economic world, we sort of talk about human resources as something that can be used in order to accomplish a goal. So we must leverage our curiosity and desire for progress, but not endanger our survival. With knowledge comes responsibility. So AI has to be done right. And we need to accept our humanity as imperfect beings and maintain our capability to develop our spirituality. Basically, I think we need to retain, and we need also to teach and to learn to live our life as a human. Okay, we need to feel, preserve, and share the profound sense of mystery and awe of our existence and of that of the cosmos in which we find ourselves. We are unique in our innate spirituality, a given capability to recognize that there's something more to being human than just our sensory experience. And this leads us to faith. So let me conclude on faith, and let's ask this question. So if an AI entity was asked itself, you know, why am I here? What would they answer? Well, the answer would be straightforward. Because humans created me. That would be the answer. How do we humans answer this question? That's the point. We must strive for all humans to find faith and continue to help the spiritual aspect of their being. The real truth is what we cannot understand. That is a fact. But faith really allows us to understand that there's a reason for humans to be here. There is a meaning of life. And really, as I said, faith is the process by which we come to realize that this is the case. I think that when we realize that there's a reason for us to be here, that there's a meaning to our life, then we come to the conclusion that we're more than biological computers. And so I would like to finish on an optimistic note saying that humans are more than biological computers. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, André, for this excellent talk, and which will now be completed by the talk of Daan, and then we will have the occasion to discuss all these stimulating thoughts. Daan, please.
Hello, yes, my name is Daniel Bernardus. Well, Daan van Schalkwijk is my Dutch name, but I use my first names usually in international context because it's a bit easier to pronounce, so you can call me Daniel. I've been here before, so I think quite a few of you know me. Thanks a lot to Antoine for the invitation to come back. I'm here with Sam and Emile, who are supporting me. So as you see, the feeling of being exceeded in intelligence is not very unfamiliar to me with these people sitting next to me. I have, before I start, I just wanted to say that during between Christmas and New Year, I was on a retreat, and we were reading from a book about the prophet Elijah, and he was combating the Baals of his time, you know, the idols, and you could very clearly see that the idols were basically the concupiscence of the flesh, the concupiscence of the eyes, and the pride of life, all combined together in a very powerful force. And it feels a bit like what Elias was just telling us, is that he's really trying to be the new prophet Elijah, because the kind of forces that he's trying to combat here are I think of that strength. So it's a very inspiring book, by the way, Elias. So maybe I'll give it to you. Anyway, let me talk indeed about on the topic that André was just talking about. I'm going to take a little bit of a more philosophical approach, as you are used from me. I will again start from the work of Leonardo Polo that I've talked about in the past, but the thoughts I present here are my own, building forward on a small subset of Polo's very extensive work, which I cannot all present, of course. Well, I've been asked to start from the following axiom, right? So humankind has a dignity and value that animals and machines do not have. I think it's an axiom all of us share here. And then I was asked to answer the question whether God is needed for understanding human dignity. I will therefore first dive into the question what the origin of human dignity is according to modern classical and Christian thought, so different philosophical views of the human being. Then what could we mean by needing God in each of those thought streams? And then we'll see how the conclusions from the different thought streams collide and also cross-fertilize. And based on this reflection, I will draw several conclusions. So the first, first I'm going to talk about what is the origin of human dignity. And I've talked about to you on previous occasions, I think, about three roots that Polo identifies, three core conceptions of what it means to be human. And it's no surprise that these conceptions are tightly linked to how we conceive also of human dignity. So I'll briefly recap each notion and then link it to human dignity. So for modern thought, what makes us human is what we produce. We produce things, but we can also produce knowledge, and we could even, some say, even that we produce ourselves. So a lot of the things that we've talked about today, of course, are about this producing capacity and the things that we can do, the things that we can that we can make. Now, this notion has implications for human dignity, because if we really make ourselves human, then in a way we also make our own dignity. And this could easily lead to the idea that more successful people are also somehow more dignified. And so maybe you could say that even more successful machines are more dignified than human beings. In contrast, the central notion in classical thought is that of the act. Classical thinkers realize that, first of all, we are actually human, both in our being and in our thinking, but that the human potential we all possess does need to be realized. So become what you are is a typically classical slogan. In this vision, dignity is something inherent in each human being, yet also intrinsically related to rationality. Now, not necessarily in the sense that one really needs to exercise rationality to be dignified, but rather that the rational capacity which we can develop testifies to the inherent dignity that we possess. Finally, in the context of Christian thought, the notion of person became central. Linked to this conception is the idea that we are all unique, especially also in the context of the personal relationships that we have. So I'm not just an exemplar of the human species. I'm a person with a name, with a unique relationship to my parents, to other people, and most importantly also to God. It is therefore in this uniqueness and relationality that my dignity becomes manifest. All right, so this is a very brief introduction to human dignity from these three perspectives. And I'll now talk about what do we mean by needing God. The expression, do we need God, evokes Laplace's response to Napoleon's question, where is God in your system? To which the answer was, sire, we don't need that hypothesis. Now, such an approach is very much in line with the modern and specifically the scientific mindset, because in that view, we are independent observers trying to give an ordered account of the physical world that is verifiable, or at least to be corroborated by empirical observation and specifically by controlled experiments. According to this mindset, then, the question is whether we need to introduce the God variable in order to explain the human dignity observation, if human dignity can be observed at all. But could this question also be approached differently? I know that I know nothing is a famous saying attributed, a classical saying attributed to Socrates. Its precise meaning is debated, but anyone familiar with Plato's writings will agree that it's certainly not a form of nihilism. So by the way, if you haven't read the Apology, and we're with this a lot of scientists, so there's chance that people haven't read it, please do so. Even for a scientist, it's a very inspiring read. So rather, it stems from the realization that the reality Socrates is trying to approach, even though it can be successfully approached through reason, cannot be exhausted by reason. So the balance between what we know and what we do not know is decisively tilted to the direction of what we do not know. In other words, there's a decisive component of mystery to our reality, and we need to remain open to that. In that light, the question, do we need God, takes on a different meaning. It could read something like, if we rationally confront the mystery of the world, is there then reason to think that God exists? To which the ancient Greek answer is a resounding yes. Now, to delve into the different classical proofs of God's existence would go too far here. I would just like to point out one concrete observation, which is the very fact that our rationality says something about the real world at all. Seemingly, the rational order we can give to things in our minds somehow corresponds to a rational order in the world around us. The professor of theoretical biology that I studied under, called Bas Kooijman, repeatedly expressed his admiration at this fact, even though he was not a very religious person. How come the world is so ordered if we also know that things left alone tend to increase their entropy? Or in scientific terms, how come the world has laws for us to discover? Now, the Greeks, reflecting about this rational world order, came to think of a mind of the universe. So yes, the Greeks thought, because of this and other arguments, that there is reason to think that God exists. Now, even though Socrates did not conceptualize the personal approach that I'm now going to talk about, and which was deepened in Christian thought, I think his story can also be used to illustrate what a personal mindset would entail. After all, his quest for wisdom was triggered by his relationship to the Delphi oracle, who had said that Socrates is the wisest of all men. Socrates himself didn't believe that, and he set out to disprove the claim. Also, he was often driven by what he called his daemon, or so kind of an inner voice that he heard, to do or not do certain things. So, for example, his daemon prevented him from entering into political life. At the same time, Socrates' teaching was highly relational, attempting to have profound conversations with many people. Those conversations were aimed at the good for those people, but weren't for that reason always comfortable to everyone. Indeed, he irritated many, which would eventually become an important factor for his condemnation to death. Now, in this personal and relational approach, the question, do we need God, takes on a meaning of God having a place among the persons we intimately relate to, in order to guide us towards what is good for us and to give us direction and meaning in our life's adventure. Clearly, at least Socrates needed some divine help and guidance for that. Now, through our reflections on our being persons, we come to a whole new way of approaching the divine. Indeed, we discover our intimate desires for coexisting with others, for not being lonely, for freely knowing and loving others. This goes together with a desire for making sense out of our lives and for us to have a life project that is fulfilling, also in relation with others. Those desires can be repressed at times, right? We can be, completely focused on our work and not think about anything else, for example, but they tend to come back after a while. So while the desires themselves sometimes may seem a bit vague and confusing, their negations, for example, loneliness, lack of freedom, lack of loving knowledge of others, does seem to cause harm to our mental health in the long run. From that, we can deduce that seemingly our personhood does have some universal demands to make on everyone. Our relationality, that we relate to others, is constitutional, it's in us. And therefore, if reality is indeed also reasonably constituted, it makes sense for us to proceed from a relational reality that can fulfill our desires. This is a route of reflection, a natural route of reflection, to discover our divine filiation, our being children of God. So what I've just kind of sketched for you is a way to reflect about our relationality and from there come to divine filiation. If we then look specifically at the context of Christian religion, here we find a realization that God is not some abstract entity, but a loving Father who always takes action to approach us, which we've just celebrated actually in Christmas, and to actively restore the relationship with him that we have lost. A relationship that reveals not only more about God to us, but also helps us to get to know ourselves and the meaning of our lives much more profoundly. Now, it goes without saying, I think, that in the Christian answer, do we need God to take action to restore this relationship with us, is answered with a firm affirmative. Yes, we do need him to do that. All right, so coming back to the main question, combining what we've seen from the root so far, can we formulate the different answers to the question whether we need God for understanding human dignity. So someone steeped in modern thought with a scientific observer mentality might say that we make ourselves more dignified, our dignity results from our actions, therefore we don't really need God for that, right? Someone steeped in classical thought may say, rationally but humbly exploring the mystery of the universe, would say that if we carefully reflect about what rationality is, if we come to realize that it is an essential element of what makes us human, and if we reflect on where the origin of rationality lies, we come to conclude that we have God to thank for both our rationality and our dignity. And then finally, someone with a personal and more relational mindset, looking for one's own personal and unique mission in life in a free, knowing, and loving relationship together with others, will through reflection realize that the strongest source of the dignity in his life comes especially from this filial relationship with God. Now, trying to synthesize all this, we now have three parallel answers corresponding to different views of what it means to be human, and different attitudes, I think, very importantly, towards this question, which, by the way, is also a very important trait of us humans. We can take attitudes toward things. Now, the popular and relativist thing to do would now be to say, well, choose your pick, whatever feels good to you. And in a sense, that needs to be said because clearly the attitude we take towards problems is our own to choose. However, if we are indeed reasonable beings, we can think about which attitude is most reasonable to take before this question. And of course, to what extent these attitudes and answers can be combined. So I would like to end with a few reflections about this final question. I think it's superficial to say that all attitudes are born equal, especially because these different approaches allow us to understand a different range of realities. It doesn't have to be argued to this audience that natural science is a very powerful methodology that has taught us much about the natural world, and we've seen many examples of all the great technologies that it can bring to us. However, thinking that the foundation of science, the very fact that human beings are able to observe the world and say reasonable and true things about it, can be understood from within science is simply incorrect. As the Greeks observed, objects of thought are special, especially because they have, for example, immaterial properties. They are not subject to time, for instance. That means that the fact that science works shows that reality is richer than what science itself can study. And for answering these profound foundational questions, actually the classical and personal attitudes are much more fitting. So, and according to these attitudes, yes, we do need God in different ways, also to make sense more deeply, sense of and to understand more deeply our own human dignity. So this was all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daan. Then we have now time for the discussion, and I would like to give the floor to, first of all, Mark Fox, then Vuko, then Daan, Alfred, Anna Grace, Gennaro Luise. Mark, you can go with your question.
Okay, so I have a recollection of a little anecdote I'll share with you, and then I have a question for Ilias and Anna. This is a little anecdote from an old thing. This is from last century, long time ago. Anyway, so when I was a graduate student, I used to like attending, each year there was an annual debate, science versus religion. And this debate was organized by the Jewish Society, and they would have the rabbi and some other Christian, and against them was always Richard Dawkins. And so it was all the question came up, some of the questions of, well, what does it really mean to be human? And in his case, he's not thinking about artificial intelligence, he's thinking about, an advanced ape or something. What's the difference? Are we just a random product of evolution, or is there something special? Anyway, there were various discussions, but eventually a question came from the floor, which totally threw Richard Dawkins. It's rare, he's very articulate and very clever, and he usually wins his arguments. Anyway, someone put up his hand and said, Professor Dawkins, explain from a evolutionary point of view, the purpose of laughter. And it just threw him. And actually, I thought it's kind of an interesting one when you can throw out in arguments with people, maybe that one and things like it. Anyways, that's my anecdote. My question is to Ilias. So whenever there's a new technology appears, you always think of it, to begin with, it's usually just a scientist mucking around in the lab, having fun, discovering things, and then people eventually realize this can be used for something. And people think, well, it can be used for good or for evil. And for example, I teach courses on laser physics. I remember teaching people very early on realize, well, lasers can be used for good things, or they can be used for bad things. We are no doubt communicating with each other now by lots of little laser pulses going down an optical fiber. That's why we can talk together over the internet. But you can also use a laser to as a death ray. You can blind people with it, etc. And I think people realize that early on. And as far as I know, there's no obvious other evil use of lasers that people haven't thought of. And very early on, people realized that was there. But the sort of interesting but scary thing also with that artificial intelligence and quantum computing, you just don't know where it's going, what could come. Things like the lasers and cars, they realized cars could run people over, so they needed to be careful about it. We know driverless cars, well, we know there's lots of risks there, and etc. But with the human computer AI, you just really don't know where it is. And it's so hard to think, well, we've got to get the ethics sorted out, but we don't know what the ethical issues are going to be. So I don't know if Ilias or Anna has some thoughts about that and where it might go.
So Ilias had to leave, so he said I would have to field the questions. So is your question the current ethical issues, or where we think
there will be some current ethical issues, but which we are aware of, right? And we need to regulate about these, and that's, I know Ilias campaigns very hard for this. But the problem is with some of these, with things like quantum computing and artificial intelligence, you just don't know where it's going to go, and you're going to have a problem. The problem will arise before you've realized you've got the problem. This is the thing you really worry about, I think.
So I think, you are right. We don't know where it's going, but there are predictions. So for example, the cryptography, like people are already implementing quantum safe cryptography. So I think one of the most important things is education, because it's such a niche technology that you're not really taught it in school. I think I did it a tiny little bit at the end of an A-level, which led on to a physics degree. But so a big thing is public awareness, and then the kind of surrounding fields that help technology be used in a good way. So you need lawyers, you need theologians, philosophers, all these people that aren't trained in, for example, quantum physics, need to learn enough about it to start tackling these questions from the different viewpoints that needs to be looked at from. So I think awareness is a really important issue in no one can predict the future, but if you have lots of different angles, you can make a better guess than if you just have one lens.
Well, thank you, Anna. Thank you, Mark. Hugo, please, you want us to contribute?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so thanks a lot to all the speakers for these very interesting talks. Just a few words about myself. So I'm a particle physicist as well, so a colleague of André. Actually, I started my career where he's now, PTH, but I'm in Zagreb in Croatia right now. So about one of the distinguishing things of human nature, clearly the achievements of AI are impressive. I mean, whether we're talking about these robots of Boston Dynamics, AlphaGo that has won not only chess, but also the world champion in Go, which is supposedly much more complex than chess, and recently this protein folding problem. But one thing I notice is that in all these achievements of AI, the goal, so the problem, is always set from outside. So, I mean, we are always the one who are setting the goal. So I was wondering whether one of the things which also maybe is characteristic of us is this ability to set our own finality. And I was wondering, maybe Anna or others who, if you want to contribute, would you agree, or I mean, do you see AI now as a classical more into actually setting its own goals?
Marcin, you're probably more into classical AI than I am.
I mean, certainly the AI I know is more about classical AI, but whatever AI problem or example I know, it's always solving a problem that has been set from outside. While I as a human, may actually decide that, for instance, well, I want to learn quantum computing or to play the piano, which then I may do more or less effectively. But one of the things that we humans do is set our own goals, which, as far as I see right now, is actually not happening in AI. Whatever it is always is a way to solve a problem which is defined from outside, never by itself.
So let me give a partial answer from my point of view. I guess we are still technologically very constrained to produce AI for particular tasks. Yes, that the AI who is winning the chess will not run the Boston Dynamics robot and vice versa, and hence we are constrained to set some quite precise aim. Yes. However, within this aim, one can perceive different routes. Let's say also try to achieve different intermediate aim. Yes, how I would say it. Yes, in the chess you can go for trying to hunt the tower. You can go for hunting another figure, to say it like this. Yes, and the question is, if we go towards systems capable of performing more complex scenarios, more various scenarios, can we, for example, give the aim of some improvement, self-improvement, growth, and how it will then correspond to what we human are like trying to achieve in our life? Yes, so I think it's very difficult topic to answer. I'm not saying that it's not like that. It could be that like setting the goals is something specific for us. It could be that these goals we are setting are coming from some deeper principles which are written in us. And of course, now I'm telling all of this outside of referring to Christian context. This would be still another thing, but trying to just do it by pure reason, I would answer like this.
Well, André, do you have a comment to this question?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So hi, Vuko. Long time no see. So setting goals, I think you can actually, it's something that you can learn, and you could also teach to a machine to do that. I think it's a little bit to where I see we are is that, again, it's my analogy. I try to show that with my analogy with the flying and imitating birds. I think a lot of the AI activity is still at the level where we're trying to imitate birds. So we're trying to imitate the way people think when we think about artificial intelligence, just when in the same way people try to learn how to fly by imitating birds. Then there was a theory of aerodynamics, and this really changed the game. And I think that at some point, okay, although we're not there yet, and there's clearly the technological aspect that we discussed, but I think it's more profound. There will be actually progress that will lead to the theory of intelligence. And this will be the real breakthrough. And I don't know if it's in 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years. But you see, today aerodynamics can be used to design planes, helicopters, and drones to fly, but it can also be used for other things because it's a general theory. So if you had a theory of intelligence, I have no doubt that you could also essentially use this theory and implement, an AI system that is able to think independently, sets its own goals, and live essentially kind of a human life at that level. So I think I don't see any conceptual problem there. I think it's just a matter of time. And we will be faced to this kind of situation someday or another. So to me, the difference has to be sought somewhere else, not only everything that has to do with sensory experience, eventually making decisions, creating, all this will eventually be replicatable by technology, I'm afraid.
Yes. So thank you very much, André, for this comment. Please, Alfred, then Alfred, Anna Grace, and Gennaro. So please, Anna.
So I'm André. I work on a PhD on new technologies, but from a legal standpoint. So I have a totally different perspective. And one of the points I wanted to bring up was tackled just before, this idea of what makes us different, and where they can set their own goals at. Before the command that was done just before, my idea was that maybe what makes us different is that humans have this intuition of where are our limits. And if we can't fly, we can imagine that maybe we could try to teach ourselves to fly or find ways to do it, while AI basically will say they are not designed for it and they cannot go further. But from what I understood so far, we can go beyond that at some point, and we can hope to go beyond. So my comment will mainly be related to the ethical aspect of AI, and something that Ilyas mentioned in his presentation is there's this whole debate about ethical AI, and we often say that we can do good out of it. That it's more, I mean, in my opinion, ethical AI, and it's all related to how we train it, how we design it, how we use it, how we control it. So that's the role of humans in that, and this is how we can do good with AI. But if quantum computing can bring AI beyond that, and instead of us just using it as a tool, AI can develop further and start acting its own way. If we already struggle with classical AI to render it ethical, how can we conceive it as something that we will use to do good if it goes beyond that?
So I have 2 comments on that. So firstly, quantum AI will still need to be trained. So humans will still be in charge of the training. And then the second point links to a question that was brought earlier about freedom. And I don't know if there's any, I don't know the answer to this, but it's the role of randomness. So if quantum seems to be inherently random, if that can kind of mimic freedom in some way, then I don't know what boxes that will open. So that would be a big topic for further discussion, but that would be my 2 comments. So that humans will still have to train the AI, but then if getting to the next step, fundamental randomness can mimic or even produce freedom, then yeah, I don't know where that would lead.
Yeah, because that's a tricky part, because then how can we do good with AI if it becomes free on its own to a certain extent? Because we train it, but it can go beyond the training to a certain extent.
Well, we don't know if it can go beyond the training.
Okay.
That's just open question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then Gennaro, please, you have some comments to make, and then Alfred again. Let's Alfred. Gennaro first.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I would like to add some comment, final comment to the beautiful presentation of Daan, which I agree very well. I would like to add a metaphysical perspective on the idea of God and human personal dignity. My idea is that establishing the absolute dignity of the human person is impossible without the idea of the absolute. But this idea, the idea of the absolute, is, in my opinion, the philosophical version of the idea of the divine person in religious experience. But the philosophical idea of absolute is not necessarily a confessional idea of God. I think that we need at least a metaphysical idea of God to ground and to found the human dignities, not necessarily a confessional idea of God. So we can demonstrate, third statement, that to conceive the complete reality as a matter of experience without an absolute being external to the finite reality is self-contradictory, because it is equivalent to consider something contingent, namely reality as a matter of experience, and consider something contingent as something as necessary, and this is auto or self-contradictory. Then fourth statement, to conceive a proper and complete notion of person, we need a metaphysical, although not necessarily a confessional, notion of God. Being a person is being virtually absolute. And I can add the fifth, this is my fifth and final statement. From a Kantian point of view, that is agnostic but not atheistic, as everybody knows. From a Kantian point of view, we can establish or ground a formal notion of personhood, a merely formal notion of personhood, as a categorical imperative, founded on the moral notion of God and morality, and so gain the notion of human person as an imago Dei. I would share here in the chat the small paper, the slide in which I summarize my metaphysical contribution to the notion of God. If notion of God is to the answer to the question of if the notion of God is implied or necessary to the human dignity notion. So I share my contribution here, although I'm not able to share my screen.
Well,
go in the chat to find my file.
May I respond, Antoine? Or?
Yeah, please. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Gennaro. I think it's indeed very valuable. I had little time, but indeed, I do think it's a good thing to have this metaphysical notion of God further developed. From the perspective of the thought of Polo, though, I also have to add that. So what I've tried to show, this way towards divine filiation, this personal way towards divine filiation that Polo comes towards, is explicitly not metaphysical, but it's also not confessional. So it is what he calls a transcendental anthropology approach towards personhood, which means that we have certain what he calls personal transcendentals, which are the ones I talked about, personal love, coexistence, freedom, and personal knowledge. And through reflecting about these, we get an anthropological approach to God, which is again not confessional, but reflects more deeply on this way of looking at personhood. So I think the two things we are saying are complementary. So I want to emphasize that, but I also want to say that what I've tried to say is different. Thank you. Okay,
then Alfred, please try now.
I would like to make comment. It's first the talk of Anna. I like it very much. This positive approach, what the role of the quantum computing could be for humans. But more general, I would like a comment about the role of art as a way to see difference between a human being and other ones. And because art, in a certain sense, many people say it, art is to make the invisible visible. So it's very ambitious what art has in mind. Art can be literature, can painting, can be music, but it makes the invisible visible. And if you see the examples we had before the talk of Marcin, of course, you can say either it's the art of the software writer, what you see the result, for example, of the painting of Antoine, or sometimes it's also charlatan. That means when if you ask somebody to make some art, it does something, but a real knowledge, who really knows art can distinguish that from real art. And so in that sense, I would say the art is a very important way of distinguishing the human being from others. And perhaps others could comment that real art can make visible the invisible.
Well, thank you. I see still 2 questions and then we have to conclude. Please, Joan Vidal, you want to comment?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yes, okay. No, very shortly, because I'm a doctor in medicine and I am a specialist in bioethics and law, and I have attended the conferences with a particular interest in this field of medicine, and well, I have to say that I am a little bit preoccupied, a little bit worried, because quantum computing and artificial intelligence seems to have some dangerous consequences on medicine. Some of them are very good, very reasonable. For example, an optimization of the knowledge of human body, diagnosis, treatment of illnesses, and so on. But others, like, for example, DNA manipulation, design babies, and all kind of human enhancement, so increasing racism and discrimination of people and so on. This is really something that I take for granted is going to start as soon as artificial intelligence starts or begins. Then the implications for medicine and medical ethics in a world adrift in an atmosphere of relativism and lack of values are, in my opinion, not very nice. Hans Jonas, a very famous philosopher of medicine, proposed the principle of responsibility. Well, if you think that of a particular technique are going to start but consequences, then he proposed not to start this technique, but this is not possible anymore in this field that has already, it's a revolution that has already started. Then in a world that flees from God and his message of love, to give free rein to its most primary instincts, especially the lust for power and domination, which based on the manipulation of others seeks its own enrichment and exaltation and so on, so on. I think that we have to be also to feel this urgency in this field that I am exposing, since so in my opinion the situation demands of all of us, people who still believes in human dignity and in God, of course, an urgent intervention in the form of getting the problems that we have mentioned to be debated in the media and trying to participate in seminars, conferences, and all kind of ways to get people to reflect on these dangers. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I think it was a very important contribution from the point of view of bioethics. Please now, Marcin, you want to comment on freedom, please?
Yes. Yeah, thank you. I will try. I'm an engineer, an environmental engineer, so I wanted to talk about philosophy. Maybe Daan can complete afterwards. So I was thinking about what you were saying about the difference in between artificial intelligence and human beings. And this freedom is the difference. And we have something that is mainly our bodies. And how is our freedom linked to our body and energy and material? I think there is a huge question, yeah. and maybe it's a way to go into this big difference and to know how we, as Alfred said, that we pass from invisible to visible. Is the material, our bodies intervening in this field? And I think your research in quantum energy and all this kind of research is also revealing what we are made of and who we are is spiritual and material, so separated or is linked. So I really only wanted to open this question and this, yeah.
Thank you. Marcin, is someone still who wants? André, do you have a question still or a comment?
No, Antoine, it was left over.
Okay, then we go to the concluding remarks. I think we have met common ground in this axiom mentioned by Daan. Humankind has a dignity and value that animals and machines don't have. And as André put it, we are more than mere biological computers. Well, this is, we could say, sort of axiom. Either we are for humankind, for humanity, or not. There are two possible ways to defend the uniqueness and value of humanity. I think we can summarize what has been said. Humans have superior capabilities. We could argue on this. It looks like the enhancement of artificial intelligence by quantum computing could have the result that actually machines have superior capabilities to us, and that then we could say, well, something more robust is needed as capabilities. And we could also ask, why do superior capabilities justify that we should not kill other humans while we are allowed to use animals for food? I think this is the question also Joan refers to with bioethics, no? So if we rely only on capabilities, it may be that it is not easy to justify the human dignity, and that is probably why today human dignity is called into question, as Harari says. Something more than capabilities is needed, and here we have seen different references to the image of God, and also to the fact that to make this also, we are called to share in God's love and reach eternal life, and that to make this possible, God became a human being. Well, you could say, well, being in the image of God and the incarnation of God are certainly principles of the Bible and Christianity. But I would like to stress that they are likely more. And that is why actually the axiom that humans have a dignity that animals don't have is shared by many people in the world who are not Christian. And that is that this idea of the image of God and even the incarnation of God is part of a universal revelation, and which we find explicitly written in the scripture, but is somewhat also written on the heart of all human beings. This is sort of a content of divine origin hidden in the truth about humankind. And in this sense, they are likely, these principles are likely the strongest defense of humanity. So we can end here for today, but I think it is an important question we will have to continue discussion, is this idea that in fact with the idea of human dignity somewhat is linked to this idea of being in the image of God and to this intuition that we are offspring of God. I would like to end by referring to tomorrow's quite interesting session with Professor Dunbar. I had today a conversation with him, and I can warmly invite you to tomorrow's talk. It is really worth to discuss with him. We will have plenty of time for discussing with him. So you are invited all to attend tomorrow. Thank you very much for this exciting meeting. Happy New Year again, and hopefully we meet still tomorrow, and so we continue working on. Thanks to all the speakers.
Thank you, Antoine. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you.